Speed bumps, signposts, expensive laughs, and cheating. These are all writing tips I try to keep in mind. It's exciting when you think of something funny, right? That's exciting. I get excited when I think of something funny. It feels like a little sprinkle of magic just boop, popped into your head. It's fun. You're just walking along, you get it. Like, I've never been able to find any pattern for when I think of funny things. They do just sort of boop, pop into my head. And I'm grateful for that, So whenever you think of a funny thing, to me at least, it feels precious in a way, because you just don't know where it's coming from or when it's going to show up. However, unfortunately, you can't hold on to all of the precious things, right? Sometimes they get in the way and you got to chuck them over your shoulder in front of an oncoming train. Sad end for some of the jokes your brain comes up with. What am I talking about? Why would that be? Well, often when writing and performing jokes, you come up with really funny lines and they get a great laugh, It's very funny. However, unfortunately, sometimes they also disrupt the rest of the bit, right? They veer off the main path and they don't fit in with what else you're trying to accomplish. They mess with the momentum you were building toward a larger piece of the bit. They shift the energy in the room in a way that's not favorable with the rest of what you're trying to talk about, Gary Goldman is a comedian who wrote a bunch of tips for comics several years back on Twitter. I have a lot of those saved in Word documents. And I thought he had used the term speed bumps to describe that type of joke within a larger bit. The joke that's funny, but it gets in the way. However, I tried searching on Twitter for that reference and I couldn't find it. So I'm not sure if it was Gary Goldman or someone else who came up with the term speed bumps. But I think it's a great term for comedy. I think it makes a lot of sense and it's something to pay attention to. So speed bumps, you can accidentally put funny speed bumps in your joke that mess up the rest of the bit. So you got to sacrifice the precious thing and let it go. If you love something, let it go. It's not worth it if it derails the train from heading the rest of the way into the station. You got to get to where you want to go. Here's another one. This is one I made up, I think. Continuing with the road analogies, signposts, right? Signposts are things that aren't funny that you need in the bit to keep driving the story forward. Your audience always needs to know where the story is headed, right? If the audience gets disoriented within the bit, they will lose interest. You need to give them signposts that sort of usher them along in the right direction and make them feel like they're on their way towards something valuable. There's got to be some of those plot points for people, breadcrumbs, if you will. Signposts, they don't have to be funny, they can be funny. So speed bumps are funny ideas that get the audience off track, and signposts are not necessarily funny parts, but they keep the audience moving in the direction you want them moving. They keep emotional momentum, interest, and engagement on track. A couple other writing tips: expensive laughs and cheating. So expensive laughs. I generated a lot of these when I first got into comedy. What's an expensive laugh? This is a laugh that costs you in terms of believability, right? It doesn't seem like something you would actually think or feel or express. It's not consistent with who you are, at least as the audience perceives you. It may be consistent with who you are, but to the audience, it feels like you're lying to them, you're deceiving them, like you're playing a trick, right? It feels like you're doing a cover song, it's not in your voice. Those are expensive laughs. Again, not worth it. Much like a speed bump, it's gonna throw off the rest of what you're doing on stage. You're digging a believability hole in the ground for yourself. And again, always somewhat painful to chuck something funny you thought of onto the railroad tracks. But it's worse if you try to hold on to it. Maybe turn it into something you can put in a sketch for one of your friends, something like that, right? Use that creative energy and idea in a different avenue. Or if you really do think or feel or believe that thing on some level, but it doesn't blend with the rest of the material you're currently working on, put it on the back burner. I do that all the time. I have so many jokes on the back burner. Humans contain multitudes. We're very complex. So, make an album where you do weird jokes and make an album where you do dark jokes, one where you do dirty jokes, one where you do clean jokes. There are no rules as long as you're being honest. However, it will still be complicated to jump between those different styles and forms all on the same album or within the same set. Unless people know you in all of your complexities, that's going to cost you with the audience if you don't plan it out a little bit. People tend to like to see simpler presentations. Until people really know you, they generally want something relatively simple, pretty easy to digest. And it doesn't have to get this extreme, but there have been some stories in the news over the years, since I've paid attention to comedy, about various comedians lying about the details of their lives for jokes. Be careful with that. Those are expensive laughs. I'm not a believer that when you're on stage, you have to only say things that actually happened. I think that can be limiting, right? Unnecessarily, creatively limiting to set that kind of a rule. I think emotional truth is more important in art than like a journalistic truth. However, you got to be careful about saying, this is 100% true story, check this out, and then lying to people's faces and saying something that isn't true. That's not good. That's going to cost you. There's a way to conduct thought experiments and play around with ideas on stage without straight up lying to people. So that's expensive laughs. Basically, it's getting a laugh at the cost of being dishonest on some level. You lose some integrity with the audience. So last writing tip here, cheating. Some people would call this being hacked. Cheating is unoriginal. It's not your own work. It's punching a laugh button will do the job because, not everyone is a sophisticated stand-up comedy connoisseur. But ideally, you want your jokes to work with everyday people and with sophisticated stand-up comedy connoisseurs. If you're cheating, doing hacky stuff, there's no risk in it. It's a fart joke. Not to say you can't write original fart jokes. Fart jokes can be wonderful. I have fart jokes. I like a good fart. But generally, people will laugh at a well-placed fart joke. It's pretty easy. But how good do you really feel about that if there's not much unique or, a little more nuanced about it? Nuanced fart jokes? Yeah, that's what I'm talking about on this podcast. Personally, I struggle with this one, because I'm also a person who thinks most of what human beings are capable of saying and doing has already been said and done. We've been around making stuff on planet Earth for long enough. We're just reinventing the wheel at this point, At least in Western culture, we're all just repeating Shakespeare and the Bible. Human psychology only runs so deep. There's not that much new and fresh to say about the human experience. We're kind of all just stumbling around in a modern context, creating fresh commentary on things that have already been thoroughly commented on in art and literature for thousands of years. None of this is completely fresh or new at the end of the day. So in that sense, it's all cheating, right? We're all cheaters. There's nothing new under the sun. We're all influenced by what came before us and what other artists are doing. None of us have any ultimate ownership over this stuff, in the final analysis. I'm not saying we should disregard copyright laws, but I think you get the point. We're not the final author. Like, you can be a filter, but you're not the source of any of this. You're not the source of any of this. Even so, there's art that gets closer to originality than other art. You may not be completely unique, but you can get further away from generic. You can get further away from generic. That's a decent comedy album title, Further Away from Generic. I don't know, a decent test, could anyone do the joke and be as successful doing it as you, right? If you put enough of yourself in the joke, it will get more difficult for other people to reproduce, and you'll get further away from what feels like cheating. So to review, you want to look out for funny speed bumps that throw off the mojo of a longer bit. Make sure you give the audience enough signposts that they can follow where you're going, not get lost. Don't lie to people for a laugh. They'll trust you more if you maintain your artistic integrity. And try not to cheat by doing unoriginal things, even if that's sort of impossible. It's kind of impossible, and you're going to feel like a fraud on some level if you experience enough of any art form, I think. There's a tremendous amount of incredible stuff out there. Most people simply aren't aware of everything. Like, the more you become aware, the more you're exposed. Like, the more you're exposed to enough work in your art form, it's hard to feel like a complete original. Here's another way to think about it. Part of what makes you an original is actually your flaws. People can't mess things up in the same way you would. You might think it's better to cheat and get an A on the test, but actually, you'll end up with a more interesting, original sound if you just go ahead and get B's and C's, right? They'll be your B's and C's. In some ways, the mistakes make it more distinct. So don't go for the easy laugh, go ahead and fail. See what people think of that. See what people think of that.